The waitress set down my check, glanced over her shoulder to make sure no one was watching, then leaned in close enough that only I could hear her. Her voice barely rose above the clatter of dishes and quiet country music drifting through the little roadside diner. She whispered, "I get off at 8. Then she straightened up, forced another smile for the customers around her, and walked away like nothing had happened. For a long moment, I stared at the receipt in my trembling hands. I wasn't a man looking for romance. I was a broken father who had spent the last 3 years trying to survive after losing almost everything. But something in her tired eyes told me this wasn't about flirting. It was about hope. It was about two strangers standing at the edge of lives they no longer recognized. Before we continue, if you believe that kindness can heal even the deepest wounds and that everyone deserves a second chance, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Dad's Second Chance. Your support helps us keep bringing heartfelt stories that remind us all that love and compassion still exist. Every Thursday evening, after finishing my construction shift, I drove 40 minutes out of town to that same old diner sitting beside Highway 14. It wasn't because the food was extraordinary. In truth, the coffee was usually lukewarm and the booth squeaked every time someone shifted their weight. I came because it was the only place where nobody knew my story. Nobody looked at me with pity after hearing about the accident that took my wife, Emily, 3 winters earlier. Nobody whispered about the father struggling to raise a 10-year-old daughter while drowning in medical debt and grief. For 1 hour every week, I could simply be another tired man eating meatloaf and mashed potatoes before returning to the tiny apartment where my daughter Lily waited with homework spread across our kitchen table. The waitress had been serving me for almost 6 months. Her name tag read Claire. She couldn't have been much older than 35, though exhaustion had painted years onto her face. She never asked personal questions. She simply remembered that I preferred black coffee, extra gravy, and cherry pie only when payday had been kind. I noticed little things about her without meaning to. The faded wedding band she still wore even though no husband ever appeared. The dark circles beneath her eyes. The careful way she folded every dollar tip before slipping it into her apron pocket as if every bill carried enormous importance. Some people wear invisible scars. Claire carried hers quietly, behind polite smiles and endless apologies whenever an order took too long. That Thursday felt different from the moment I walked in. The diner manager barked at her in front of customers over a minor mistake, and she simply lowered her head instead of defending herself. An elderly customer complained about cold fries, though they had barely touched the plate. Another family left without tipping after making her run back and forth nearly a dozen times. I watched her absorb every insult with heartbreaking patience. It reminded me of my own life after Emily passed away, when every day felt like carrying a mountain while pretending it weighed nothing. When I finished dinner, that was when she leaned down and whispered those unexpected words. At first, I misunderstood them completely. My heart raced, not because I imagined romance, but because I hadn't believed anyone had truly seen me in years. Then I flipped over the receipt. Written across the back in hurried handwriting were 8 simple words that changed everything: "Please don't leave. I need someone to listen." For 2 hours, I sat in my truck outside beneath flickering parking lot lights, wondering if staying was foolish. Part of me wanted to drive home to Lily. Another part remembered how many nights I had prayed that someone would simply ask if I was okay. At exactly 8 o'clock, Claire stepped outside wearing an old denim jacket, carrying a backpack that looked nearly as worn as she did. She climbed into the passenger seat only after I nodded. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Silence sometimes says more than words ever could. Eventually, she confessed the truth she had hidden behind every smile. Her husband had abandoned her nearly 4 years earlier after gambling away their savings. He left behind mountains of debt and their teenage son, Ethan, who had recently been diagnosed with a serious heart condition. Claire worked double shifts almost every day because insurance covered only part of his treatment. She hadn't whispered to me because she wanted a date. She whispered because she had seen me every Thursday quietly folding children's drawings back into my wallet before paying my bill. She believed I looked like someone who understood what surviving felt like. Listening to her story was like staring into a mirror shaped differently but reflecting the same pain. We talked until nearly midnight beneath the glow of a closed gas station across the street. She cried only once, apologizing immediately afterward as though tears inconvenienced everyone around her. I told her about Emily, about learning to braid Lily's hair from online videos, about crying in grocery store aisles because I couldn't remember which cereal my wife always bought. Instead of pity, Claire simply listened. For the first time since becoming a widower, I felt understood instead of judged. That single conversation became the beginning of an unlikely friendship. Every Thursday after work, instead of rushing home immediately, I stayed until Claire finished her shift. Sometimes we sat in the diner parking lot. Sometimes we walked around the quiet town square. We spoke about children, impossible bills, sleepless nights, and the strange guilt that comes with surviving when life doesn't unfold as planned. We never tried fixing each other's problems. We simply reminded each other that neither of us carried those burdens completely alone anymore. Weeks turned into months. Lily eventually met Claire while waiting for me one evening. The two connected almost instantly over books and baking recipes. Ethan, despite his health struggles, loved fixing bicycles and quickly became the older brother Lily had secretly wished for. Before long, Saturday afternoons were filled with simple dinners, board games, and laughter that sounded unfamiliar inside hearts that had grown used to silence. Life, however, wasn't finished testing us. Ethan's condition suddenly worsened, requiring an expensive surgery much sooner than expected. Claire quietly prepared to sell her small house. She never asked anyone for help. Pride often grows strongest in people who have already lost too much. But small towns notice quiet suffering. Without either of us realizing it, the diner customers who had watched Claire serve them for years began organizing fundraisers. The local mechanic repaired my truck without charging me after learning about my own struggles. Parents from Lily's school collected donations. Even strangers who had never spoken to Claire contributed because kindness, once witnessed, has a remarkable way of multiplying. On the morning of Ethan's surgery, the hospital waiting room overflowed with people carrying homemade casseroles, coffee, handmade cards, and prayers. Looking around that room, I realized something extraordinary had happened. Two broken lives had unknowingly created a community simply by refusing to stop believing in people. The surgery lasted nearly 7 hours. Those hours felt endless. Every ticking clock reminded us how fragile life could be. When the surgeon finally emerged with a tired smile and quietly announced that everything had gone well, Claire collapsed into tears unlike any I had ever seen. They weren't tears of fear anymore. They were tears of relief, gratitude, and hope finally breaking through years of darkness. Recovery wasn't easy, but Ethan grew stronger with every passing month. Lily smiled more than she had since losing her mother. As for Claire and me, neither of us rushed to define what we had become. Love born from shared pain grows differently. It begins with friendship, trust, and countless ordinary moments before it quietly becomes something impossible to imagine living without. Nearly 2 years after that unforgettable whisper across a diner table, I returned to the same booth where everything had started. Claire brought my coffee, smiled the smile I had waited so long to see, and set down the check. This time, another handwritten note rested on the receipt. It read, "Thank you for staying." I reached across the table and gently took her hand. Sometimes the smallest decisions shape the biggest futures. Had I driven away that night, 4 lives would have remained trapped inside loneliness. Instead, one whispered sentence became the doorway to healing none of us expected. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, leave a heartfelt comment, share it with someone who may need encouragement today, and subscribe to Dad's Second Chance. Every act of support helps these stories reach people who may be waiting for hope, just like these two were. Blue Heart special request: before this story ends, please comment below. Kindness always finds its way. We'd love to know where you're watching from, and your words may encourage someone scrolling through the comments today. Life rarely changes through grand miracles. More often, it changes through quiet moments that almost go unnoticed. A smile offered to a stranger. A decision to stay a little longer. A willingness to listen without judgment. The waitress who whispered, "I get off at 8, wasn't asking for rescue. She was asking for someone to believe that her story wasn't over. And in helping her believe that, I discovered something I had forgotten after losing my wife. Sometimes God doesn't send answers wrapped in certainty. Sometimes He sends them wearing a diner apron, carrying a coffee pot, and whispering the exact words your heart has been waiting to hear."